Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this 19th edition of the International Conference on Quality in Education, dedicated to the theme of digital transformation of educational systems at the service of quality. And I am pleased to welcome four great speakers: Supriya Mathew from India, Sushin Moait from United Kingdom, Vitaly Zaitsev from Ukraine, and Sigamoni Naikar from South Africa. Our, our first speakers will be Professor Vitaly Zaitsev from Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Okay. I don't. Oh, yes. ITSTEP, it's organization in Ukraine, is one of many parts of big organization. ITSTEP is a quality IT education in Ukraine. More than 20 years ago, the company started with computer courses, and now it includes IT courses, some school, college, and for university, for example, Kharkov University of Technology, ITSTEP. The last 2 years have shown that in condition of global challenges, it's necessary to use EdTech in the education process. It means instrumental platforms that allow you to organize the educational process online. Global IT giants and companies offer many tool solutions. For example, Microsoft 365 Education, Google for Education, Moodle, Open edX, Canvas, and many other big and small EdTech solutions. As the experience of the COVID-19 pandemic has shown, is very convenient when the online education process takes place on the same platform that all participants of the education process are used website of the educational institution. What was in the beginning in start COVID-19 is some CMS systems, 2 messengers, emails, test toolkits, LMS platforms, webinars, and many other educational toolkits for organization of educational process. All EdTech tools must be built into the site. During the times of the COVID-19 pandemic, and now during the war in Ukraine, the Kharkov University of Technology STEP implemented a solution other solution from the educational process. For example, Class Nautinka project. This project content is CMS system for build of website of institution, system of registration, electronic system for recording students' progress, LMS system, webinar rooms, and other. This system help organization for students for his studies. The new realities of education, when the traditional educational process and online education are combined, became start to the introduction of new educational technologies and technique at the university. Initiatives by the need to ensure the quality of education and cyber protection during education. We have reduced the number of students in group to ensure the quality of education process. We began to record lessons and place them in students' profile in automated systems. We analyze up to 50% of online class to improve teaching, feedback from methodologies and students for teacher who make adjustments to the educational process. We train teachers in modern educational practice with automated systems Syntegro. We introduce gamification into educational process, especially for school and school children. We completely change the approaches to conducting classes, theoretical materials at the beginning of the class, and its consolidation in the practical parts of the class. We changed the approach in working with correspondence students. Now they have introductory classes at the beginning of each month, and project work moderated by a teachers for 3 weeks. We introduced new approaches to prevent academic dishonesty. We give great attention to the cyber protection of the education environment, electronic educational resources, and personal data of participants in the educational process. This is only part of the work that we at the university carrying out on the permanent basis. As the experience of the past 2 years has shown, our technologies of online education and mixed class have allowed us to maintain the quality of students' education and confidently look to the future. Excuse me, our students are ready to work on juniors position in IT companies already in the second year study. And we are ready to share our experience with other university and other educational institution in our country and abroad. We have many many IT companies took part in educational process. Excuse, I have don't. I have not good internet connected in Kiev. Thank you for attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vitaly, for your interesting presentation, which focuses on how was changed the approaches to conducting classes and the consolidation of to practice and prevent academic plagiarism. Thank you so much. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Sigamoni Naikar from South Africa.
Uh, Thank you, Chairperson. So I have a very different view on technology. And I think that from a developing country perspective, I mean, if Morocco is looking at a solution in terms of how to transform the education system, you have to ask some questions about, what should that transformation take? I don't say that technology is inappropriate. I think there are other dimensions that I want to talk about that I think is very important in addressing the transformation of education in developing countries such as Morocco, South Africa, Mexico, Kenya, and other countries. So the first question I want to ask is, did John Dewey get it wrong 130 years ago or 140 years ago? So he said that it's the office of the school environment to see to it that each individual gets an opportunity to escape from the limitations of the social group in which he was born and to come into living contact with a broader environment. So if you assess the environment in developing countries such as Morocco, that was a very ambitious vision, because I don't think he he probably did, but he never mentioned it. The impact of the economic system on the education system and the levels of inequality that impacts on educational outcomes. And so John Dewey's promise has yielded very little for working class children across the world. So what I did was, in terms of my work, I looked at what's happening in Morocco. And this is what the research says. When the number of actual years of schooling was adjusted for the amount of learning, in Morocco, the number of effective years of schooling was on average 4.4 years less than the number of actual years. This reflects the learning crisis that Morocco is facing, like other countries, and the urgency to improve the performance of the education system, to ensure that it provides all the basic set of skills that are necessary to contribute as citizens and individuals to the Moroccan society and economy, just like other developing countries, such as South Africa and other countries that I mentioned. So what do they say? They say that 75% of students in primary education in the country do not have technological means in schools. 53% of secondary school and university students, and an estimated 65% of educational centers do not have good internet connection within their own premises, with 49% respectively in high schools. The report expresses concern about the resources that are available, and teachers and professors have already stressed several times the lack of digital tools that are not available, that they have asked on numerous occasions to obtain these means. So if this is the reality in Morocco at the moment, and it's of course the reality in many developing countries where you have a huge technological divide, you have to ask the question, where do you focus your energy and where do you focus your resources? So I think, and I pose this research problem, which is similar to the one that Mileston and Jackson posed in 1962 in the United Kingdom, who, by the way, for the last 150 years, haven't solved the working class issue and the level of inequality in the UK. So, we often ask the question, we have problems in the developing world, does the solution lie in the developed world? And I don't think so. I mean, the question is, and the question that Morocco has to ask, and South Africa and Mexico and so on, and the United States and the United Kingdom, why is it so many middle-class children successfully complete the total grammar school course, or we may inquire, why is it that relatively few working class children do so? And of course, you have to ask the question, how do you retrain people who manage the education system? What kind of theoretical tools do you provide to people who work in the education system? And can you speak about transformation without looking at the issues that confront the education system, where it hasn't enjoyed much success in the last 2 or 3 decades? So in Morocco, even prior to the COVID crisis, Morocco was struggling to stay on track to meet the 2030 targets for inclusive, equitable, quality education and lifelong learning. In 2019, 66% of 10-year-olds in Morocco were not able to read and comprehend a simple text, a score of 2.5 percentage points lower than the Middle East and North Africa. And the regional average was 10.7 percentage points lower than the middle income country average. So you see, there's a fundamental problem with planning education, especially around vulnerability and working class children. So if you look at the developing world, you have to ask the question, how do you address this issue, right? And so in this conference, you're talking about technology. But, is technology a realistic investment in a country where the inequalities are so high and so many young children cannot read? I don't believe technology doesn't have a place, but I think the focus of the education system has to be different. So in my work, I am trying to develop a education tool based on social justice for vulnerable children. And when I looked at the problems in Morocco, and when I looked at the problems in my country, and I looked at the problems in the developing world as well. In the United States, there are some states, for example, New Jersey is ranked second on the second in terms of the 50 states, or somewhere on the top 10. But in terms of vulnerability, children haven't made progress over the last 10 to 15 years. So I decided to look at literature in the United Kingdom to see what has transpired there and what are the challenges based on the work of major theorists in the field. So Mileston and Jackson did pioneering work for working class children in Huddersfield in the 1950s. And they have a very strong statement about what is wrong with working class education. They explain that the way in which education continues to fail unacceptably large number of working class children. And it points conclusively, as other studies have, to the loss and the wastage of ability under the education system, and the problems of mass participation in the education system, and the debilitating effects for some children of economic and material deprivation. So that study by Mileston and Jackson is a very important study. And I think planners in education who are planning education around vulnerable children should look at Mileston and Jackson's education in the working class. So Diane Ray is a professor at Cambridge, I think, and she wrote a book called Miseducation, Inequality, Education in the Working Class in the United Kingdom. And she says that education policy is based on the false assumptions about human nature, with greed and self-interest taken to be the only reliable attributes. Education has not been able to set up to compensate for the social and economic inequalities. Social justice and equality are too far down the priority list. And the function of schooling is to preserve the class and select the elite. So this is a very important point if you're talking about transformation of education in the country. Education has not been set up to compensate for social and economic inequalities. Now, I was in Morocco once, and I'm sure if I go there again, I'd like to see some of these areas where there's a large-scale inequality. And I can tell you something, if you're looking at the norm in Morocco, or if you're looking at the norm in other countries, you'll find that some of these communities, like in the United Kingdom and United States, are 40 to 50 years behind. So you have to ask yourself the question, what is wrong with the system and what is wrong with planning? So Stephen Ball says, in the UK, as far as social inequality is concerned, education policy does not work, or is not working well. In the United Kingdom, all problems are still there. Gone are the days when radical thinkers naively thought there could be progressive advance to the reform of the education system. And education is seen as a crucial factor in ensuring economic productivity in some countries, which is really a problem, because you need to look at what impact education has on outcomes for both working class children and middle class children, and how the education system actually compensate in terms of social capital and in terms of cultural capital. So the economic system is a problem. Bowles and Gintis point this out. And they ask the question, how can we best understand evidently the critical relationship between education and the economy? And any adequate explanation must begin with the fact that schools produce workers. Here they speak about the relationship between schools and the work environment. So this is what all the theorists are saying, right? And this is in the UK, where they figured that cultural capital was a problem, and that what happens in education systems is that they impose a middle class norm on the system and expect working class children who are socialized differently, different social capital, different cultural capital, to succeed in the system. So when you
We
talk about,
can't, we can't see your slides.
you can't, okay, what I'm doing is I'm just deviating from the slides just because of time. How much of time do I have? Okay,
Okay, it's
you're
good.
fine. Okay, so let me just talk about Paul Willis's work, right? So Paul Willis did some work in a working class school in the UK, and out of Willis's most important findings was that the children were completely uninterested in school. Remember this point: the children were completely uninterested in school. They saw the school, they saw the whole point of schooling as having a laugh rather than trying to get qualifications. Their approach was to survive it, to do as little work as possible, and to have as much fun as possible by pushing the boundaries of authority and bunking school as much as possible. So I'm going to skip a few slides here because I think that I want to examine the fundamental question now, right? And that is what Pierre Bourdieu talks about, the cultural deprivation theory. He says that this theory implies that higher class cultures are better when compared to working class cultures. Because of this perceived superiority, people from the upper and middle classes believe people who are working class are themselves to blame for the failure of children in education. Now that's, for me, is a very important point. And so if we want to recognize all these theorists and their summary of education in the United Kingdom, which is said to be a first world country and so on, you have to ask the questions, if we're talking about countries like ours where there's such a high level of inequality, what is our intervention? Right? I'm going to skip a few slides. What can we learn from the major theorists? Is that there's something fundamentally wrong about how we plan education in the developing world. And so we need to understand that curriculum thinking and the purpose of school needs a radical overhaul. That the economic model and the children being victims of the whims and fancies of greed and domination. And let's be honest about this, right? That the whole issue of technology has been useful and has been helpful, but in the final analysis, it gives people an opportunity to make money out of education, where education becomes an economic commodity, right? Because the political insights and the goals favor the middle class. And so when you take technology and you want to transform an education system, and you haven't asked the question, why are so many children left behind? Then we have a problem. We have a problem all over the world, not only in Morocco, but all over the world, where working class children struggle in the education system. So what are the suggestions to those who develop and implement policy? Have the theoretical tools to understand the problem? That's the first question, right? And so what is the way forward? So I am of the opinion, and there's a lot of work being done here by Amartya Sen, John Rawls, a long time ago, and many other contemporary theorists who talk about a social justice model. That, for example, when you plan education, you ask the question, is this going to bring about a reduction in inequality, right? So there are many questions about the curriculum, but what intellectual tools do you use to inform your thinking about shaping the curriculum? And my view is that if you use a social justice theory, you have to contextualize the development of the curriculum within the lived reality of people. So we need a new pedagogy. We need to change the education narrative based on social justice in terms of planning education. We have to ask the question, how do you compensate for social and cultural capital in the development of a pedagogy? And curriculum restructuring in the formative years should take into consideration self-esteem, self-image, motivation, and confidence. Early childhood education requires a radical overhaul. So working class children, you have to start from naught years. Not from four and five, but from naught years, to compensate for the social and cultural capital. We have to rethink, if so many children are not reading, is the literacy program relevant? And the literacy program should not only be about reading to children and exposing children to print. We should have a far more deeper understanding of why people do not read in working class communities. Because those are the children that cannot read for meaning. That's a 66% in Morocco. And the figure is about 66%, 50% in many developing contexts. So Chairperson, I'm going to stop there. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Segamuni, for your interesting presentation, defending the point that technology is not the solution to many problems of education in developing countries, especially social justice challenges. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Supriya Mathew from India.
Thank you, Professor Danji. Professor Naikar, that was a very interesting piece. And I just wanted to add a thought there. The education in the developing world, hasn't it mostly been designed by the developed nations and the developed cultures to, for the developing nations to serve them? And these developed nations at some point in time had colonized these nations. So the idea of social justice was not the premise of designing the education system. But it was a very interesting piece, and I would love to hear more because I saw that you had to skip some slides. So with that, I'll just go into my presentation. Okay. So I'm just having some, this is a new technology for me. Professor, I can't upload my presentation.
So if I can add, I think that you wouldn't be able to see your presentation, but I think you have to put it on your screen and but share it under present. So there's a word present there. You press that and you share it, and then you display it and speak to it. That's what I did. So because
Oh, thank you. So here I go, present, share screen. And now can you see my presentation?
It's okay. We yes, yes. Yes, it's good.
Okay. Right. So good evening, everyone. Good evening from India. I'm Supriya Mathew, and I'm an international education practitioner, currently the Vice President International for Dayanand Sagar University in Bangalore. It's quite an honor to be here with so many educators from around the world. And I'm very excited to talk about the innovations, simple innovations which emerged due to COVID 19 in the digital educational transformation. Now, COVID was a calamity, and a calamity always imposes the regeneration of the social order prevalent in a country, in a culture, and in the world. Albeit the regeneration definitely is forceful, but definitely there is always a renewal in the society whenever we face some calamity. COVID, in its wake and throughout its ravaging journey, made the world to break a lot of unbreakable systems. The old systems were overhauled and redefined to give way to a new order, which was digital across sectors, across industries, and across the world. Of course, the higher education had to make way for a digitalized learning experience for the students because higher education, I believe, was the biggest hit that happened when if you compare to the sectors, because other sectors were comparatively more digitalized, and they were already moving into digitalization much before COVID. So, higher education got the full blow of the COVID 19 on the face, and the education system across the world reeled, whether it was the K 12 sector, whether it was the higher education. My talk would mostly be on higher education because I'm from that sector. Uh, a digital wave came forward because of COVID and stayed in spite of our reservations. And we moved into a kind of a new digital era and innovated some fascinating online learning with varying degrees of physical interactions. With a world which resumed itself at the same pace after COVID and same style of movement, digitalization settled in as a necessary part of higher education. This archetype shift in the higher education sector is a scenario where digital technology is firmly placed as a necessary component of the whole teaching and learning process. My talk would border on some very significant calls to action in HEI, which now are being accepted into mainstream teaching pedagogies. Subsequently, I would also like to analyze how the digitalization of higher education has changed the face of teaching and learning forever. In hindsight, what I see is a revival in the systems of working, living, and relating to each other on a local, national, and global level. It was a very symptomatic revival at first, where people were enforced to find new ways of dealing with everything in their life. Entire systems of the world got a rework. Wow. None of us had ever envisaged such a rapid transformation, and a complete transformation for that matter. For the higher education, the digital transformation was not just symptomatic in nature, it was complete, unplanned, unprecedented, and totally disruptive. It was a phenomenon. The education system as a whole was one of the biggest hit systems. Everything was put on, everything and everybody was put on in an incommunicado mode, and literally a pause button was hit to inject some humor over here. And definitely we, the educators, were stunned into a momentary silence, because most of us were not really prepared to get into an online education. I know, I mean, my university and my peers, my colleagues, we all were stunned. Like, what has happened? And although my last university where I was when COVID hit was quite technical in nature, we were very technically savvy, but it was a stunning moment for us. We were stunned into silence. And then we all moved. It surged, and it was, that is what I call as the renaissance of higher education. And most institutional setups where online education was hastily put together was majorly insufficient to handle the needs of educating the masses who were sitting at home, confined within their houses and literally immobilized. But the various actors of the industry of the education engaged, regrouped, restructured, and we EdTech came forward, and a lot of things came forward. A restructured thought process was brought forward to teach the masses. As I look at it, there were three major things which came forward. Uh, and these three digitally savvy pedagogies found their way into the classroom in a post COVID scenario. So, the before COVID teaching was a mostly classroom teaching, and the digital interactions were some sorts of videos. I'm talking in a very Indian setup over here. Objective questions, videos, and some quiz forms. There were never any simulated learning labs which had come into practice during COVID. And these simulated learning labs also became a part of the engineering classes. I very clearly remember when dealing with edtech online companies, we used to tell them that, online education is fine for liberal arts, humanities, and business, but for engineering, we prefer to teach our students in labs and real time situations. But the classroom teaching came with a premix of web based learning after COVID. Blended learning, where students could learn from other organizations, get certificates from the edtech companies or from firms or from universities from different parts of the world. I'm an international educator, so there were a lot of certificate courses which we introduced for our students as a part of their mainstay degree. Then online learning, synchronous and asynchronous self-paced learning came to be easily accepted for upskilling as well as a part of the mainstream degree. According to a UNESCO report in 2019 on future of learning, COVID-19 showed us the weaknesses of our system, including and highlighting the risks in inequality in privatization of education, but it also helped us to become practical and address the people who were actually reeling under the effects of inequality and poverty. So, digital education was no longer an option. Government also got together and virtual infrastructures were built around the country as well as in small cities. It became the vehicle of a transformative driver to remove inequalities and unintentionally bring justice into education. Arguably, COVID has some digital innovative techniques which found their way into our classrooms, and intercultural learning was easily acceptable. I'm going to bring you a real life case study which I practiced during COVID, and it came to be adopted in the mainstream education of the degree programs that we used to deliver in my university. Uh, and Post COVID, also, this case study became a regular feature in our classrooms. So, let me talk about COIL, Collaborative Online Intercultural Learning. It is a very old form of student exchanges virtually, but we rewrote it and we worked on it in a very enthusiastic manner. So during COVID, COIL came to be widely accepted into many digital classrooms, and then also COIL found its way into many physical classrooms post COVID. Let's focus on the digital classroom, which emerged as an output of COVID. So, a professor from a university in Canada and a professor from a university in LPU, they came together and they decided to teach a class of history from a Canadian perspective and from a Indian perspective. It was a very exquisite multicultural and intercultural experience, and in a way it also helps to address the social justice and inequality in education, especially privatization of education, because for some students, when these professors they got together and they started teaching a class over a period of 2 months, for some students, this was their first intercultural, cross cultural, and international experience, which they could not have afforded in a regular classroom setup. So, there were two classes which merged together into one digital classroom, a Canadian classroom and an Indian classroom. The learning outcome that happened was it supported the development of intercultural competence, becoming an important aspect of the learning outcome. For many students, they could engage with people into different cultures, into different religions, into different ethnicities. It was very likely that these students came from very different communities, but most students were able to reflect on the cultural differences in the different setups that they were interfacing with. Honestly, I feel had it not been the boundaries that barred us from moving to one from one country to another, we would not have invested so much time in COIL. Coil was a very, coil is a very present practice, and it has been happening in Europe for years and even in US and UK. But it had not taken such a form and such a decisive shape in my internationalization practice before than this. And what came after this semester during COVID, when the students were a part of this COIL activity, was that these professors they made COIL a part of every semester, even the post-COVID situation. So some benefits of COIL that I would like to take you through. It connects accredited courses linking the classroom digitally of two or more higher education institutions, each located in a different country or cultural setting. Engages students from different countries sharing an online classroom, creating equitable team-taught learning environments where faculty from two cultures work together to develop a shared syllabus, emphasizing experiential and collaborative student learning. Our first time COIL effort showed promise as a fruitful international learning opportunity. Without needing to travel abroad, students had meaningful, valued engagements with peers in another country. The COIL approach presented to us a very practical way to prepare students for diverse multicultural work settings likely in their professional futures, while still helping fulfill academic program goals at each of our institutions. It also helped the faculty members conceptualize lessons that promoted intercultural respect and appreciation. The learning transformation was complete, interesting, and very practical. Unlike other online engagements where the students have been known to complain about the lackluster online education because the learning is very minimal at times, this COIL experience became a milestone and was embedded in each semester that program. Other professors within the university also shared their enthusiasm towards getting more COIL activities, and we from the international office got really busy linking professors with our professors from all over the world. And COIL became a surge. We went ahead and did many other engagements on similar lines. So coming out of COIL, I went, we did a lot of other activities which were very online, very innovative, and very intrinsic to the institution. I'm speaking on a very subjective level over here. We did a lot of online yoga classes for students and faculties to partner and non-partner institutions around the world. And the interest and engagement was massive. Of course, during COVID, the interest was very huge. But post-COVID, there were a lot of requests to do such kind of programs for cohorts. So to sum up, a little bit of innovation went a long way to make the teaching learning a lifelong experience for the students. It also added value to our classrooms forever because it became a term on term activity. And many such activities that we did, regularly became a regular part of our curriculum. That was COVID for you. But how was it different? I also want to touch upon some other innovations that happened post COVID. Smartphone adoptions, for instance, learning by screen or virtual education now will remain to play a major role in the post-pandemic world. Digitalization of education is the future. While we are dabbling in digital delivery of education before the pandemic, a post-pandemic world has made it necessary to accept the digital education and thus has entered the smartphone, so that the smartphone has helped for adopting the online learning. Now that digital education is an accepted norm, one major thing that we need to look into as educators, and what government also needs to look into as the regulatory body, that now digital education needs to be regularized. There has to be quality checks and compliances in place. The government has to spruce up efforts for providing the necessary virtual infrastructure so that remote learning can be improved. Access to high speed internet and affordable gadgets to use and access online resource is a challenge for cities that have a less secure virtual infrastructure. While big cities have an advantage because they have efficient and secure Wi-Fi systems. So government has to come in to do the quality check. It has to help build up a high speed and affordable virtual infrastructure. The key trend of digital learning includes the need for upskilling courses. So upskilling courses have been accepted as the mainstream digital learning, but more regularization needs to be done when these courses, online courses, are accepted in mainstream degree based learning, especially in a country like India. A major concern of parents as well as teachers is the inequity in learning that arose in online classrooms. Teachers could hardly tell how well the students comprehend and understand the concepts of the subject as they themselves are teaching from behind a screen. So, some measures have to be put into place for evaluation and understanding whether there has been a learning which has happened. So, the learning outcome evaluation has also to be put in place. Another major innovation which was lurking in the backyard that came forward after COVID was the virtual internships. Now, these virtual internships previously were not really acceptable or acceptable in mild ways. Now the full force of these virtual internships have been accepted, and they have become a regular part of course curriculums and otherwise also in the education system. There is a need for increased cyber governance and cyber security for all. On top of that, cyber awareness lead and learning of the cyber etiquette should be now added in the curriculum. So cyber governance should just not be added in the curriculums. There should be some free courses given by universities to help learn the people who are not into the education system. I'm just going off my line over here. People who are not in the education system, elderlies, parents, even helpers, support staff, they should be taught cyber etiquette and cyber governance, because the world is becoming virtual. It's just not the education, and the government has to step in. We have really traveled a long road, but we need to walk many more miles before the teaching outcomes and the learning practices and the learning outcomes of the society are fully achieved. Thank you. That ends my talk. I would be open to take any questions if there are.
Thank you so much, Supriya, for your interesting presentation, which focuses on collaborative online learning and intercultural change of experiences, especially virtual internships and digital evaluation. Thank you again. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Session White from United Kingdom.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Am I audible?
We hear you very well.
Okay. Yes. Just a minute. I'm presenting my screen. Is my screen visible?
Not yet.
Okay.
I think you just have to put the share screen.
Yes.
And then it will show, because this was a similar situation where Professor Paniker earlier guided me.
Hopefully now you can see.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, we got it now. I think you just have.
Yes. Yeah. So I'll start. I'll take around 12 to 15 minutes to explain the idea, and then I would love to take questions as well. So basically, I'm interested in presenting rather two important ideas. So first is service learning as a concept itself, because apart from US, I guess in other geographies, service learning is not established pedagogy. So I would like to elaborate that first, and then secondly, how we can use technology for driving service learning and how it can help us in achieving SDGs. So that is basically my core argument here today. So to start with, service learning. So service learning basically is a pedagogy in which students go to communities for some community service. In the sense, let's say they will work on any community issues over there, which can be very simple community issue, like let's say I come from Indian background. I come from India, and let's say in any of the villages, uh, there is garbage is the issue, or there is no clean water. So students will come together and will work on that particular issue. Well, while working on such community issues, educational institutes try to teach them curricular subjects. So there are two important components here. First is service, in which we are trying to solve community problem, and then second is learning. So both are 50-50% component. And then it is essentially said that you cannot have inclination towards either of it. So it cannot be purely service, or it cannot be just learning. So generally in few internship, so learning is focused more as compared to service. So that is not expected in service learning. So service learning give equal importance to both this part, service and learning. So why it is essential to focus on this? I consider specifically in global south or geographies, uh, people are still struggling to meet basic necessities. This particular pedagogy can help them work on both the things. Firstly, it can increase their learning outcomes, and secondly, it can help them solve community issues. So obviously, students are very young, so we are not expecting them to take entire ownership of community issues or community problem. But what we are looking at is, if at all they get exposure to community issues at young age, on the longer run, they might take responsibility on their shoulder when they become adult, when they become responsible citizen. At that time, they will be able to solve those issues by themselves. They will take responsibility together with other community members and will solve those problems. So basically, the long term objective is that students will become responsible citizen, and at the same time, the immediate expected output is that learning outcomes will also increase. Now, why learning outcome will increase? Simply because this particular pedagogy is kind of a project based pedagogy, where students do certain projects, they feel more engaged. There are researchers which has confirmed this, that during service learning projects, students feel more engaged because they feel that their contribution is valued. So it is just not about learning, but about working on certain projects, which is essential for their communities and their fellow members as well. So if you see, it is trying to achieve both the ends. One is community betterment, and secondly, higher learning outcomes. So this is service learning. Now, after establishing service learning, uh, I just want to focus on like why it is essential. There are various I would say various policy demands across the ladder. So might be at the national level, and apart from that, at the international level as well, through UN and various other bodies have emphasized that in higher education, uh, this kind of pedagogy or this kind of learning should be emphasized, where students will take responsibility of community. They will work on certain challenges which we are facing as humanity. So, because of that, service learning is increasingly getting a lot of importance, specifically when it comes to SDGs, Sustainable Development Goal. People feel that service learning has potential to achieve sustainable development goals through educational institutes. So, for that, nowadays there is an increasing emphasis on this. Well, after establishing that service learning is there, it is important. There are a lot of policy demands about service learning and then similar kind of pedagogy, but there are certain issues, and my entire talk is focused on that. Even though service learning is established pedagogy, it's like we are practicing it for more than 50 years now, but today we are still facing few important issues, challenges with it. And Three major challenges which I identified are, firstly, there is no standard process of service learning. When I say that any educational institute or any university is implementing service learning, I don't know what are they doing. I don't know what are the steps involved in it. Secondly, there is no connect between local level, state, national, and at the international level, like UN bodies. So there is no connection between this because uh, each nation is expected to implement, if at all they are part of UN, they are expected to work on SDGs. They are expected to achieve the minimal uh, threshold. They are expected to meet all the goals. But even if nation build their internal policies which are aligned with SDGs, uh, there is no way that this particular pedagogy or service learning can understand what is happening at the local level or what is happening at the state level, how state bodies are working, or how central governments are working, and then forget about international. So there is no established connect between these three layers. And then lastly, there is another issue, that is the visibility to stakeholders. In the sense, there are many stakeholders involved in it. In the sense, educational institutes, their administrative department. If at all we want to make sure that uh, SDGs are connected to whatever educational institutes are working on. So we need to have visibility at both the layers. So somebody who is like monitoring implementation of SDGs, they also need to have some visibility about implementation. But at the same time, students also need a visibility. They also need to know what are they working on. So if you see that there is no visibility, in the sense there are no uh, kind of implementation dashboard which can help them understand what is happening exactly. So these three major issues I can identify right now in service learning. So to reiterate, so firstly is there is no standard process in service learning. Secondly, there is no connect between local, state, national, and international policies. And then thirdly, there is no visibility to all the stakeholders. So what I'm proposing, and then I'll come back to these points again. So these are the major pain areas. But what I'm proposing is a technology-based solution for handling service learning. Then I'm suggesting that there can be a guided process for all involved stakeholders. Thirdly, I'm suggesting that there can be interactive executive dashboards, so which will give visibility to all involved stakeholders. And then lastly, I'm proposing that there can be AI based or data science involved or machine learning based intelligent systems, which can help students understand or that can give them futuristic suggestions. So I'm proposing a solution of this sort. So I already implemented this one of the technology platform. Well, like all features are not live right now, but I implemented it partially. So very quickly, I'll come to these points again. So as I mentioned, that standardization of process itself is not there, but which is not completely true. There are processes, uh, but before going to that, this is how my students look like right now. They are very confused because there is a lack of standardization. Students don't know what to do when it comes to service learning, or rather this is same case for my teachers as well, because as institutions don't have standardized process, everybody keep implementing their own process. As last week I was speaking, that she mentioned that due to digitalization, like people are now using Google Forms and then various other technological aids. But when every institute start designing their own Google Form, we don't know what are they adding. Every user, according to their understanding, keep doing something, and that lead to this kind of situation where people are confused. They don't know whether it's right process or not. This is what I'm proposing, that there should be guided steps so that they know what to do. I'm not saying that like everything should be, because education is something which cannot be standardized up to that level. We cannot have industrial standardization in education because every student is different. But what I'm saying is there can just be a guided way for students to achieve what they want to do. So if at all they want to implement service learning or be part of it, then there can be at least few basic steps which can help them. So stepwise process, that is what I'm suggesting. So there are this established steps already, but within this, what exactly investigation mean, people don't know how to plan or act. Rather than saying that like they don't know, what I mean is that like they are exploring it by themselves, they are designing their own processes, and that is leading to multiple processes. There is no standardization. So what happened, basically we cannot collate that data together. So that's the basic problem. I'll very quickly move ahead. So this is the kind of standardization I'm saying. Well, this is not suggesting that we need to do this kind of industrialization. What I'm just saying that there can be certain steps which we can propose. They can go through certain specific steps, and then everybody goes through that. Then internationally, we know what kind of steps are involved in service learning. So this is the kind of system I built. In the interest of time, I'll skip this. Let me come to second important point. So connecting local to international. So I guess for that purpose, as I was mentioning, that sustainable development goals are something which can be used for handling disconnect between international to local. So what I'm saying is that, let's say, as per SDGs, there are certain goals and then certain targets which we have decided. So national policies can be designed accordingly. Then those can be inherited at the state level, and then local bodies can inherit from state. Now, what I'm suggesting is this is like still a system. This is what people are already doing, but there is no system which establishes disconnect. In the sense, if let's say all local councils are working on improving the let's say education, quality of education, so that SDGs local councils are working on. But like let's say there are thousands of local councils. So now if you want to bring that data together and want to understand how state are performing, then right now there is no system around that. And that's exactly what I'm proposing here. I'm proposing that we can establish a system which will connect these different layers. So this is my second proposal. I already implemented a system for that. I might show it later, but for now I'll very quickly move ahead. So this is a third important crucial issue, that is about lack of visibility. And when I say lack of visibility, I guess all stakeholders struggle with this. So it is just like they are walking with this kind of visibility, very low visibility. Everybody do, like most of the people who are involved in policy implementation, they don't know what their bottommost layer is doing. And in this particular system, I tried to include different level of dashboards so that people at different layer know exactly what is happening, what people are doing, how implementation is happening, what is the shortfall, how long it will take. So now we know that how any particular nation or any particular state is performing right now, and where are we at the as an international target. So these are the kind of system it look like. I'll skip this as well. And let me come to last important point, that is about the recommendation system. So this is, I consider, a very crucial point, and then specifically in today's world when all talent or people are moving from one location to other. So there is a, in India, like we always cry because of brain drain. But apart from that as well, I consider like all the nations face this, that people migrate from one location to other. Now the issue become, after migrating to other location, during their university days, they were working on certain community issues. Let's say somebody is very much interested in working on gender equality. After moving to other location, they don't know whether there are opportunities or not, whether people are working on that particular issue, and they are confused. They try to use some Google search or this kind of search engines, but that doesn't help them directly. So what I'm thinking, that we can design certain recommendation engine which will consume their previous data, their university level data, of implementing service learning, because that has all the involved step. Then we know exactly what was their interest area, so we can use that data to train the recommendation algorithms. Well, like, I won't go into the technicalities of that, but generally that is how these recommendation engines work, in which you train the model first and then they start giving recommendations to you. So what I feel is that, like, service learning implementation data can be used to train the models, and then further it can give recommendation to people who migrated from one location to other. This way, that particular migrated population can become a contributing population in that other nation as well. So with this, I'll skip this. There's like a few technical details how this system can work, but largely, I guess, this is how it will work, where people will get different kind of. So everybody use Netflix or the similar OTG platforms. So in that, you, like, once you watch one particular type of movie, it start giving you a similar recommendation. So that is what I'm proposing here. So during your service learning, or during service learning, if any student work on a particular issue, let's say on gender inequality, or might be about water related issues, then when they move to other locations, our system can give them recommendation of similar opportunities, and that in that new geography. So that is what basically I'm proposing here. This is partially implemented. I'm still working on this. So with these four things, I guess I'll stop with one important aspect. That is, like, even though this I'm designing this particular technology platform, I still know that there are few concerns. So we know that there are possibilities that if students are, like, were interested in working on certain things earlier during their college or university days, but now they might not be interested. So we don't know, because, like, everybody's interest change over the period of time. So these kind of challenges are still there in front of this particular system. But I believe that this kind of technology platform can help us connect university experiences to the adult contributing citizen. We can understand how they will contribute for the larger benefit of people in that particular nation. So this basically need a technology platform. That's exactly what I'm proposing here. So with this, I'll stop. If anybody have questions, I don't mind answering to that. Thank you. Yeah, I guess we don't have any questions right now.
Thank you so much, Sachin, for your interesting presentation, but unfortunately, we haven't enough time to discuss the ideas you have presented all together. So ends this third session. Thank you all for your excellent contribution to our conference. And don't forget to connect within 20 minutes in order to follow the next step of CIMQUSEF19. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.